AskReddit. What crazy ass story do you need to tell? My mom never explained to me what my period was until I woke up screaming and crying because I thought I was stabbed in my sleep. There was so much blood. I was born a super preemie. I weighed only 1 pound and 12 ounces. I'll be 25 years old soon. I was an ignorant child. My friends had a trampoline but the springs broke and the tarp tore. They convinced me that they had a buddy that was giving us their trampoline. We just had to pick it up. We rode our bikes over and went into their backyard. They said they were on vacation and it was cool. We put the springs and tarp into backpacks and rode them a few miles back to their house. It wasn't until that night I realized WTF had happened. I dated in a pattern. First girlfriend, girlfriend 2, girlfriend 3, girlfriend 2 again, girlfriend 1. Now I'm married to my first girlfriend, who was my first kiss, and we have a baby on the way. Life is funny sometimes. When I was in 8th grade, my best friend and I were playing video games at a friend's house down the street. We were on the 3rd floor in the back of the house and heard a huge crashing explosion sound outside that shook the whole house. That turned off the power. We quickly ran downstairs to see what happened. Turns out a tractor trailer at the top of the hill had its brakes fail and drove right through their newly renovated kitchen. Cost them like $20k the month prior. The truck was full of live chickens and there were dead, alive, and half dead chickens. Feathers, chicken blood everywhere. It was insane. The driver was miraculously okay, minus a concussion. Some guy from Corpus stopped by later when the police and fire trucks were there, and the company ended up giving me and my friends free chicken for life as an apology for the incident. I'm 46 years old and haven't paid for chicken at the supermarket for over 30 years. I just hand them one of the thousands of vouchers they sent me in the mail with no expiration date. For one free any size family pack of chicken breasts or thighs. I've probably saved at least $10k over my lifetime on free chicken. I stole my own car back once. I used to restore classic cars. I had the most valuable one I've ever had at a body shop, and he took forever to finish it. He had painted other cars for me, but apparently developed a drug problem. I would check on the car every week to see if there was any progress. Finally, after a year he told me he painted 90% of it, but he's asking for more money than we originally agreed. I drive there on a Friday afternoon unannounced and see my car outside the shop, worth a ton of money, with the shop owner nowhere in sight. His neighbor told me he had left the car outside for 3 days and several people have tried to steal it. So I call a tow truck and tow it to my garage right away. On my home the shop owner calls me over and over again. He thought somebody stole the car. He kept calling me for months. I never responded. I was an exchange student in Poland a few years ago. I was freshly 18 and had almost no experience with alcohol. 3rd week of school, we had a dance and I decided to attend. It was not at all like the school dances we have in the US. First off, it was held at a club, downtown. Little odd, but okay. Second, it had a bar. I was in the senior class in high school, and we were all 18, so we could drink. I was not ready for that at all. Third, I had just started smoking the week before. My high school had a smoking gazebo, and probably 1/3 of my class smoked. I started smoking to make friends lol. This turned into the perfect storm of me getting absolutely finch-faced. After blacking out shortly, I was suddenly outside smoking, and my friends and I were walking to a nearby 24H liquor store. I walked in, visibly inebriated, and bought a mid-sized bottle of vodka. The cashier was hesitant, but when she heard I was American, basically just said F it, go ham. Probably another 2 hours and another blackout later the police arrive. They start yelling at my class president for wandering in the road. For some reason drunk me decides I should get involved, even though I barely speak Polish and am super wasted. I walk up to the cop and in the worst Polish I've ever spoken, tried to say leave him alone. But what came out was leave and then a pile of vomit all over his boots. OF, this is it I thought. I'm going to get arrested and deported. The cop looked at me and said in English, "You an American?" "Yes sir," I replied, knowing I was in deep sh. The cop looked me up and down, looked at the bottle of vodka in my hand, and said, "You drink vodka? Come with me." I was put into the back of the police car, and he started to drive away. My heart sank 3 weeks into what was supposed to be the best year of my life. It was already over. But he stopped 2 blocks away at the 24H liquor store, brought me inside, and bought me a 100ml bottle of Zabrowka vodka. He said, "This is good and cheap. Welcome to Poland. Now let me take you back to your friends." As we pulled back up to the club, he leaned back and said, "Watch this." He turned on the lights and siren and 3 or 4 kids ran down the block. He was laughing uncontrollably. He unlocked the door, and as I climbed out he shouted, "Be safe, friend." 20 minuets later I blacked out again, and the next thing I remembered was waking up on the kitchen floor of the house I was living in, feeling like absolute My host mother had made coffee and said, "Damn, you had a night, huh?" And that was the craziest night I ever had. A buddy of mine and I play VR chat at Duckton. He likes to be lewd and super horny on the game though, while I use it to socialize mainly. A good big titty avatar isn't that bad though. But one day he comes on and is like, "Bro, I've never been more horny in my ducking life. I feel 13. Again." I tell him he should stop being lewd. Next day he comes on and says he's dropping the game entirely. I ask why, and apparently he had VR sex with a chick that was actually a dude. A worse nightmare, lol. Been reading Stephen Fry's take on Greek mythology recently, and the story of Pandora. Specifically, how hope, after being trapped in that box with pain and suffering, wasn't fast enough to escape while it was open. Humanity only has hope because she is forever trapped in the darkness, but ever hopeful that she will someday break free. That shit ducked me right up, and have been dying to share. Thanks for the opportunity, op. Had 2 bullies. I ducked the first one's mom and the second one had a successful acting career. It all came crashing down on TMZ. It was fan-ducking-tastic. In high school, I got in trouble for not being able to afford skates. So I went to go study in the cafeteria instead because I had a test coming up the next day. 10 minutes into my study session, my principal ran up to me with 4 other facility members screaming. Apparently it's forbidden to study in school, so I got sent home for the rest of the day. The closest I've been to a fist fight in my adult life was in a Walmart parking lot when someone yelled at my GF's doggo, grimacing face. I've been kicked out of multiple churches for doing stupid shit. One time I was eating a Big Mac and one of my mates threw some chips at me. Once I went to church and my bro tripped me in front of the priest, so I slapped him on the head. Another time, I rode a dirt bike near the church until the priest went out and shouted at me. Another time I went to the Christmas mass and there was a surprise baptism halfway through the mass and it lasted for 5 hours. So one of my mates shouted FFS really loud. The priest would go on and on for hours. This is all true BTW. When I was learning to fly at a sketchy flight school, I was doing a pre-flight check flight, close to the end of the program. I was doing the run-up in a Cessna when I smelled something. "Do you smell that? Smells like gas," I say. Instructor, 21-year-old, shrugs. Annoyed, I open the door, and there is a spreading puddle of avgas under the plane. Shh. The instructor panics, "Stay in the plane, I'll get help," and runs off. As soon as I got the engine off, I noped out of there and watched the plane dump all its fuel on the runway. They kindly gave me another plane and instructor. They fixed their plane, and a month later, I read about the same plane crashing due to fuel issues. 1 fatality. No significant repercussions for company. A little while back, my roommate was contacted by a wealthy man in the area who wanted to pay her to be his live-in pet for an entire month. She thought that this was a cute-asy way of saying that it was a sugar daddy/baby arrangement. Turns out what he actually meant was that she would be given room, board and a very healthy allowance to spend a large portion of her day dressed as a cat, walking on her hands and knees, eating out of a bowl, using a litter box, and, yes, sleeping in a little cage at night. Sex wasn't even on the table. He was only interested in having a human cat for a month. She seriously considered the offer for a weekend, and then politely declined. Edit. This allowance would have covered her college tuition for the semester. He knew what he wanted and was very motivated. My dad went to secondary school with John Lennon and was a couple years older than him. Dad was known for playing the drums and being quite musical, and one day John asks him whether he'd like to be the drummer in a band he's forming. Dad was keen, but my granny said he needed to prioritize studying, and so he didn't join. The band formed and were called the Quarrymen, and I think a guy called Colin was the drummer instead of Dad, who I believe was later replaced by Pete Best and then Ringo as they changed to the Silver Beatles and then the Beatles. I like to imagine that in an alternative universe my dad said yes, and that was history. I don't even mind that I wouldn't have been born if this had been the outcome. He really deserved to have had that lifetime.